How's everyone doing today? There we go. All right. So welcome everyone to the Jepson Leadership Forum, and a special welcome to our scholars from the SLY program who've driven here from Winchester. We are very happy to see you all. My name is Laura Del Prado, and I'm a senior double majoring in leadership studies and French and minoring in physics. I've been fascinated by photography since high school, and I'm currently writing my thesis about an innovative photography technique called light painting. As president of the University of Richmond's Photography Club, I'm honored to introduce the very talented photojournalist and multimedia producer Janet Jarman. Ms. Jarman, a Richmond native and collegiate school alumna, is an award-winning photographer and multimedia storyteller who uses her art to change the conversation and help society see contemporary social issues such as environmental destruction and open government in a new light. From her current home base in Mexico, she's covered everything from the country's drug war to Mexican-U.S. immigration issues to water resource problems and solutions to police reform. Her long-term projects include Marisol and the American Dream, a 16-year story that chronicles the plight of one Mexican immigrant family's search for a better life in the United States. Aguas Negras, which takes a look at Mexico's water-related challenges, and Chaos and Corruption, which offers a glimpse at how Mexican society is trying to force more governmental transparency. Her work has appeared in National Geographic and Espanol, Time, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the Smithsonian Magazine, and in numerous European publications, to name a few. She has worked for the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Open Society Institute, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Additionally, her photos have received awards from professional publications around the world. Janet started her career as a staff photographer at the Miami Herald after graduating with a journalism degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1989, and a Rotary International Scholarship to study in Santiago, Chile in 1995. She received a master's degree in environmental issues from the University of London in 1997. Please join me in welcoming Janet Jarman home and to the University of Richmond.
Thank you so much, Lauren. You know, public speaking starts when you get reading glasses. Thank you for such a nice introduction, Lauren. I would like to thank Dr. Peter Kaufman and Shannon Best for inviting me here, and to everyone who took the time to come out here tonight. I feel extremely honored to be standing here at this prestigious university, representing my industry at a time of upheaval in our profession. It feels even more special to give a talk in one's hometown, especially when both of your parents are in the audience and some of your trusted friends. It does mean that you get phone calls from your mother before your talk, suggesting that you make sure your hair is off your face and begging you to wear something colorful and not boring. Some things never change. On a more serious note, before I begin, I would like to thank my mother and father for teaching me tolerance, patience, and discipline, but also for providing me with education and confidence in my abilities. I didn't realize what gifts these were until I started visiting other places where women do not have these options or support. Finally, I want to thank my husband, who's here tonight. He believes in what I do more than anyone. It is no exaggeration that he made a very brave decision to marry a photojournalist 20 years ago. As some of you may know, I grew up nearby, less than a mile away from here. I remember ice skating on the lake as a child, watching my brother and my dad play ice hockey. I didn't trust the ice at all, but it was always exhilarating to be immersed in nature's extremes, where I could learn and wonder about life. My parents had some fascinating and creative friends, the best in their fields, some of whom may be here tonight. They're all here. Without even knowing it, they influenced me as an artist, showing me that it was okay to take great risks and express my thoughts in a different way. I started to evolve as an artist first through painting. I chose nature scenes. It amazed me how painting a scene and studying its detail could heighten my awareness of beauty, and make me appreciate life in a deeper way. It was not until age 14, following a family tragedy, that I discovered the power of photography during a photo class I took together with my father. As I grappled with the meaning of life amid the chaos, I realized that the process of photographing made me feel alive and conscious about everything around me. It forced me not to shut down and hide, but to search for life's beauty and confront its contrasting darkness. I used the camera then as a way to contemplate and celebrate, but also to show aspects of our society that angered me, like racism and inequality. Perhaps I was a naive child, but I refused to accept societal divisions of race, class, gender, and religion. I started to explore Richmond with my camera, speaking with anyone who seemed to be different from me. I wanted to learn how they viewed the world. As a young adult, I began to see photography or photojournalism as a powerful means to participate in society by exploring and analyzing complex social issues of our time, most of which seem to be rooted in human greed and selfishness. Photography helped me understand these issues by forcing me to observe and analyze people, their interactions with each other, and with the natural world. I had a purpose. If one of my photographs could help alter a stereotype or help someone change their viewpoint on an issue, then I would be successful. I also wanted to give subjects a way to express their points of view to a broader audience. I have been a photojournalist now for over 20 years, and I would like to give you a feel for some of my work over the years. Thank you. Most of the photos you just saw were made on assignment for US and European newspapers and magazines. Although I love being involved in the daily flow of the news, I often feel frustrated by how quickly these photos are swallowed up in the avalanche of images and news that we are bombarded with every day. Prestigious magazines and newspapers used to set the tone on important social issues, and they invested heavily in this role. In the past decade, however, the internet has put this business model in jeopardy. The public is being overwhelmed by many sources of news, and most of my traditional clients are facing financial challenges. They can no longer afford to send photographers out to work on in-depth stories. And even if they do, they face many difficulties in getting these stories noticed by the general public. The big question for me and my colleagues today is, how can a professional photojournalist continue to have an impact in framing social issues to promote understanding? I have no simple answer to this question. The profession of journalism is in tremendous flux, which brings both challenges and opportunities. One solution, if one works independently, as I do, is to become known as an expert on certain themes and to innovate by using combinations of still photographs and video, creating in-depth stories that could play a role in changing the conversation on specific issues. I have somehow become known for my work about cross-border migration and for bringing to life topics that are so ubiquitous in our everyday life that very few people give any thought to them. Topics that are often have little immediate or apparent drama, over which there is little visible conflict. But there is drama. People are fighting, and these problems simmer in the background until they sometimes ignite and erupt into conflict. Perhaps you have seen photos like these that I made 3 months ago. At the climax of a year of fighting between armed citizen vigilante groups in Mexico's Michoacan state and a drug cartel that calls itself the Knights Templar. Recently, the Mexican government entered a formal working relationship with these vigilantes, and together they have the cartel on the run, for the time being, at least. In fact, the story has many more layers, but such nuances are usually obscured in the news by the types of action drama shots you just saw. For instance, do you like guacamole? Have you ever considered how luscious avocados arrived on your supermarket shelf? Did you know that growers in Michoacan export $1 billion worth of avocados to the US each year? And that these producers have lived in fear since the Knights Templar started demanding protection money from civilians and business people. They forced many avocado growers, lime farmers, and cattle ranchers to sell them their farms for very low prices and terrorized towns through kidnappings, murders, and rapes. They burned avocado packing plants, forcing companies to cooperate or relocate. Tensions gradually rose until some communities rebelled and formed self-defense forces to combat the cartel. In the absence of police or army interventions, the vigilantes were able to liberate over 70 towns last year from Templar control. One of their most prominent leaders was a local doctor named Jose Manuel Mireles. Months before news of this struggle appeared in the international publications, I had the opportunity to work with a writer of the Wall Street Journal named Jose de Cordoba. We followed Mireles from town to town as he inspired citizens to be fearless. After my first assignment, I had what I considered a few poignant illustrations of the theme and some photos of an emerging charismatic leader. But Jose and I agreed that a more unique angle for this complex story would focus on the avocado industry. We talked to fearful residents of this village just after Templars had kidnapped, raped, and then murdered a young girl. The event was a catalyst that united rage-filled villagers to take back their town, building barricades and roadblocks, defending themselves with machetes and sticks and any weapons they could find. I was delighted that I had the opportunity to work with the journal on an unusual story that gave broader context to readers. They dedicated resources and were able to captivate the public with this front-page story the day of the Super Bowl, when Americans eat more guacamole than any other day of the year. The story spent days on the most popular list on the paper's website and seems to have inspired at least some consumers to have a better understanding that commodities we take for granted sometimes have a fraught background story. I love working on stories that surprise me and give viewers a new understanding of things considered previously mundane. Another topic very close to my heart and where I'm trying to contribute to a new conversation is coffee. Coffee is the second largest traded commodity in the world, behind oil. However, much of the coffee we drink, especially higher valued coffees made from Arabica beans, is produced by millions of small-scale farmers across the globe. Many of them live in abject poverty. Out of the $3.50 we pay for an Americano at a coffee shop, it is likely that the producer who grew those beans received only 21 cents, or only 6% of the value of that coffee. For the past 15 years, I've been documenting the daily struggles of producers and coffee pickers to make ends meet. Ever since fixed prices ended for them in the late 90s, forcing them to be dependent on volatile international market fluctuations. One steep price drop or one unexpected plant plague can mean ruin. Many farmers give up. I've seen some start growing more lucrative drug crops instead, and many leave their families behind and emigrate. Through my photos, I would like to bring awareness to their plight and to their crucial role as stewards of the land. Organic shade-grown coffee, for example, doesn't just provide us with a tasty beverage, but it also allows for diversity, wildlife protection, and stable communities. The more consumers can keep this in mind as they buy coffee, the more these producers will stand a chance, and the more they will be able to invest in and protect the land, in theory. I photograph the problems, but I'm also committed to showing the solutions. Fair trade certification programs emerged years ago as one potential solution to help producers stay on the land while enabling them to build sustainable communities. How am I bringing this issue to the attention of the general public? These images have been published in a variety of traditional newspapers and magazines, and I feel that people are becoming more and more aware of the situation of the coffee farmers. I hope that through getting to know the people behind this issue, they will demand better practices and more fair trade solutions that actually benefit the workers as opposed to only the producers. Another impact I can have is with the roasters and coffee buyers. I have been asked by one fair trade organization to exhibit these photos at the largest specialty coffee buyers event in the US at the end of April. And I look forward to discussing the realities I see on the ground with some of the people who could really make a difference. All of these photos are from Nicaragua and Guatemala and Mexico's southern state of Chiapas. Thank you. The topic that has been a mainstay in my work and where I've tried to make an impact has been Latino immigration into the United States. It's hard to hate when you can see their faces. This is what one viewer wrote me after she had seen a slideshow of my immigration photos on Time Magazine's website. It was a light bulb moment for me. It was not just gratifying that someone I respected was moved by the images, but it was a forceful reminder to me of why I had pursued photojournalism in the first place. Working in Florida in the early 90s for the Miami Herald, I met hundreds of immigrants. It concerned me that they were often portrayed in the news as statistics, not as individuals simply trying to better their lives and build vibrant communities. I wanted to learn more about their lives, what drove their decisions to immigrate, and how their lives changed over time once they came to the US. Thanks to a chance meeting with one Mexican girl 16 years ago, I have been able to document one piece of the immigration puzzle. Some of you may know this story. This is Marisol. I met her in the municipal dump in Matamoros, Mexico, across the border from Brownsville, Texas, in 1996. She was 8 years old then. It was a scorching August day. A group of radical activist nuns offered to take me to the most toxic places along the border. Surrounded by thousands of flies and burning garbage, I met Marisol and her mother, Eloisa. They had found many dead animals in the dump. One day, they found a human corpse and a fetus in a jar. Eloisa told me she wanted a different life for her family. She hated exposing her children to the trash. Months later, I returned to see how they were doing, and they were gone. The father, a legal farm worker in the US, had decided to move them all to Florida, where they had work harvesting strawberries. I tracked them down and arrived on their first day of school in the United States. They were all together at last. The kids had more space to play, but they complained that their house was infested with rats and was too small for a family of 12. Eloisa felt lonely in rural Florida, and she wanted to return to Mexico, but her husband said no. Instead, they moved to Texas, where Eloisa had sisters. Upon first glance, everything seemed fine, but behind closed doors, Marisol and her siblings had to witness their parents' bitter divorce. Maintaining my access to photograph became difficult due to the family's tension. So I decided to end the story with this picture of Marisol's sister, Christina. I thought it represented two girls trying to become friends, despite the border between them. But later, Christina told me, "That's Mary. Her family won't let her play in our yard because we're Mexican." In 2003, a leading German magazine asked me if I could find Marisol. Somehow I found her. She had learned English and wanted to be a computer teacher or a lawyer or an artist. She was determined to finish high school and to avoid the pregnancies and poverty that her sister, Sandra, had faced. One of Sandra's partners was thrown in jail. After a long court battle, Child Protection Services revoked Sandra's parenting rights, so she lost her children. Not much later, bankers evicted Eloisa and her daughters from the only place they knew as home. Their American dream seemed to be slipping away. Marisol pressed on, trying to make sense out of being a teenager. When she was 16, she suddenly changed her attitude towards me. Just after this picture, she refused to be photographed any longer. I was sad that the story had to end for a second time. Not knowing what happened to Marisol gnawed at me for over 2 years. Finally, I decided to jump on a plane to find her again in Texas. I thought she might reject me, but instead she said, "What took you so long?" To my surprise, I met her 2-year-old son, Carlos. She hadn't wanted me to know about this pregnancy since she had thought I would get mad at her for not keeping her promises to herself. At 15, she had started dating a young immigrant named Andres. Like many immigrants I've met, Andres sought not the American dream, but a Mexican dream, to return to his roots in Mexico, to live with his family, and make a decent living. But first, he needed to save more money in the US to finish building his house in Mexico. One night, he and some friends drove in convoy to New Mexico, to a place where they could obtain ID cards. 2 of his friends died on the long journey. when a truck slid on ice and crashed into their car. The funeral affected me deeply as I began to fully understand the pain parents suffer, never knowing if their immigrant children will return from the U.S. In 2007, Andres tried to realize his Mexican dream. He sent Marisol to his village so his parents could meet their grandson. By then, Marisol had permanent residency in the U.S., and she could move freely between the two countries. She barely ate for 3 weeks. The village ladies decided that she must be pregnant, and they were right. Several months after her return to the U.S., she gave birth to a baby girl named Anaí. Two years later, Andres tried to move everyone back to Mexico. He inaugurated their arrival by inviting his whole village to a baptism ceremony. It was his first time home in 7 years, and he wanted to stay. Marisol threatened to return to Texas. She wasn't sure about moving permanently to the small village. Andres begged her to stay, but they decided to leave and ended up having a third and final child in the U.S. With three children and unable to finish high school, Marisol took a job at the same truck wash with Andres. Although the acids they used burned her skin, she enjoyed making money, which gave her some independence. They could afford their rent in this 3-room trailer and could throw a nice birthday party from time to time. A U.S. doctor discounted his services so that Carlos could have the eye operations he had needed since birth. On rare occasions, they splurged at the local cinema, but usually entertainment meant watching movies at Sandra's house. Their biological father made an occasional appearance, but for the most part, he remains estranged. Taking the 3 children to Mexico on her own became a summer ritual for Marisol. Carlos loved his grandparents and told everyone that he preferred Mexico over the U.S. Marisol was still bored in Andres' hometown. "The last thing I want," she said, "is to be like my mother-in-law and have some man hand me a bunch of seeds and tell me to go plant them." She remained torn and confused about where she belonged. In August of 2012, Marisol called me in tears. She and Andres had decided to divorce, and things had turned ugly. He sent police to take her children from her, and she was desperate to get them back. Her lawyers demanded $5,000 up front before they would start on her case. She spent her life savings and borrowed money from her brother to pay the fees. Despite their breakup, they still had to work at the truck wash together. Andres eventually agreed to return the children. I met with Andres after the hearing, and I observed a man shattered by broken dreams. Marisol appeared relieved, but bewildered to begin a new life at 24. Some people ask me, why did you keep following this story for so long, especially when there's hardly any funding for such long-term projects about ordinary people? And I answer, how could I have stopped? Marisol gave me a gift by allowing me to document her life over time. She allowed me to tell a story about an important theme in a different way. Through a micro approach on one family, I addressed a macro theme, immigration, in all of its complexity. It is not black and white, but very gray. It is overwhelming for us to understand all sides, but the first step is to care. Immigration is not a sexy topic for a lot of our mainstream media. Perhaps that is why the topic is so misunderstood and the facts so easily manipulated. Many opinion leaders in the US portray illegal immigrants as a threat to our society and try to score cheap political points at the expense of people who can't fight back. Throughout history, demagogues have always tried to dehumanize the other, since this makes it easier to attack them without feeling guilt. Stirring up hatred becomes more difficult when you see people's faces. And that is one of my aims for this project, to rehumanize and put a face on the anonymous immigrant. I don't have all the answers. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not an activist. I'm a storyteller, adding one perspective to this debate. Marisol's experience is not every immigrant's experience. I have seen over the years how hard she and Andres worked in their quest for a better life and stability. I hope that by showing their reality to a wider audience, this story can contribute in some small way to changing the conversation on Latino immigration in the US from an impersonal, contentious debate to one that focuses on real human stories. You may be saying, okay, fine, this project has depth, 16 years over time, but what impact does it really have on the debate about immigration? How does it put a face on the immigration debate? As a result of the publication on Time Magazine's website and its diffusion through social media, the work was published all over the world and was included in prestigious photo festivals. I was also invited to give a TEDx talk about this issue. This talk then caught the attention of an interest group that will likely make an impact on immigration reform. It is quite striking how humanitarian organizations and other foundations are collaborating with photojournalists now, using their images to raise awareness and mobilize public opinion. Just this week, a teacher at the International French-American School in New York emailed me to thank me for this work, which he found in 6 Mois, a French magazine dedicated to publishing less about war and more about daily challenges of ordinary people. They are all very far away from Marisol's world, and your pictures are an open window on a society they are not aware of, the teacher wrote. I've also been gratified to see how the photos are being used to stimulate conversation about immigration among professionals of various walks of life. A team of social work professors at UNC Chapel Hill is featuring this work in their project funded by the National Institutes of Health to improve healthcare access for Latino youth. Professionals like doctors and teachers have a tremendous influence on the success or failure of immigrants in our country. I have seen their influence, negative and positive, on Marisol's life. To be able to reach this type of audience and help them achieve a balanced picture of some immigrants' realities means a lot to me. These types of uses of my work are what really drive me to continue in this profession, despite the tough industry conditions. As I said before, photojournalism is not just about getting published in newspapers and magazines anymore. This type of exposure is still important, of course, but as people are getting more and more visually literate, journalistic storytellers are publishing outside of traditional media, allowing photojournalists to play a role in many other forms of public debate. As for mainstream media, I hope in-depth projects such as the ones you just saw can define journalism again, not sound bites that teach us very little. But there are many forces today that discourage this process. Lack of budgets in newspapers and magazines, and a large part of society that craves celebrity gossip, sensationalism, and instant gratification. If we allow their influence to shape the media agenda, we will find ourselves in an even more superficial place. How will we learn about our world? And what will we learn? Whether we are talking about immigration, discrimination, environmental destruction, or injustice, it is tempting for all of us to put on blinders. We tend to want life to look pretty, easy, and fun, just like Facebook. Photojournalism forces us to take off our blinders. Thoughtful photos help us to notice, reflect upon, and interpret our world. It's up to you, as consumers of news, to determine how you want to manage the information that flows all around you. What are your needs, and what are your values? You have many sources at your disposal today, and I hope that you will demand and be willing to support in-depth journalism. It is in your control, and the choice is yours. Thank you. So I don't know how much time we have left, and I don't know how many people might have questions, but I actually love to talk about my work, and the only way, and just photography in general, and the only reason I had this script was to prevent myself from talking for hours and raising my hands all over the place. So I had to control myself. So. Yes, sir. I think, yes, if I remember it. I do, that was an easy one to remember. Just what are the dangers I face in Mexico? What is the most dangerous situation I've had to face? I think Mexico, the press, I'm part of the press, we have given this image of Mexico that there's a shootout on every corner of every street, and that is hardly the truth. But that's not to say that I haven't been in dangerous situations in Mexico, especially on the Michoacan story that I showed you. I think that was probably the worst it got. And yeah, you just go and people are taking over towns, and you know that after they do that, there's probably a high potential for shootouts and retaliation, which I saw and was part of. And you just have to be very aware and in constant communication with people who know where you are. And I mean, a bunch of basic security, common sense. Probably wasn't much common sense there, but just total full awareness of everything around you. And that was a very hard assignment for me because I didn't know who to trust ever. So, and I guess little things like learning how to max out your Subaru Outback. I took an evasive driving class with some Israeli police teachers. I did a story on for the New York Times. And I took a course with them, my husband, my assistant, on some self-defense. And then the Subaru people wouldn't let me do this. I asked them for a course, and they just ignored me. But I need to know exactly what my car can do, what a car, anybody's car. So things like that, and where is Marisol today? I'm so glad you asked that, because I did have a conversation with her about a month and a half ago. I was in the middle of an assignment, and Philippe, my husband, called and said, she left a message, you must call. And I called, and she said, I'm getting married. And I had to ask, with whom? And Andres reconciled, and so they will be getting married. And they have a united family again, and thank you for asking that, and I plan to continue covering this. They are in Texas. Mr. Burford. The whitbread. Well, thank you, Doug. And the people in this front section with my parents and in addition to my parents, are the people who taught me to be fearless and not just to let life go by, but to live it fully. Yes. Traditionally, I started at the Miami Herald, and you would always go out with a writer. And then when I turned freelance, it became, I'm commissioned by magazines. Sometimes a writer has already been to the scene and written a story, and I'm sent afterwards to illustrate it. Sometimes I'm sent out with writers, like the Wall Street Journal story that I showed you. And sometimes because of the many changes in the industry, I've even started doing video, and which I said I would never do, but I do love it at times. And for that, I need a team. Not a huge team, because the situations I get myself into and the trust that I need to foster can't happen with a team. I used to be in Florida thinking, why do those people have teams of 5? I can never do that. So the most I'll work with in the field is one other person, a wonderful colleague, assistant, a British-Mexican woman who's been amazing. And we just go across Mexico and carry tons of equipment and try to keep it all together. And sometimes I'll just go out by myself shooting pictures. Like today, for me to get on a plane with 2 still cameras, 3 lenses, and 1 flash is very rare, but incredible, because it rarely happens with all of the multimedia and all of the new things that we're being asked to do. In the back? I use Canon. I know this sounds strange, but I'm not a camera buff. I'm not a camera freak. I love technology. I embrace it. But I started using Canons at the Miami Herald a long time ago, and I love them. And they give me the results that I want most of the time. It's not the camera's fault if I don't get the results I want. So, Canon. Yes? No, it's a great question, and it's a huge debate in today's industry, and people are disqualified from contests because they've done too much manipulation. But in reality, I only learned Photoshop enough to get by. At the Miami Herald, and enough to get my photos to foreign clients by FTPing them late at night. I don't know enough post-production to do any damage to my photographs, and I don't have time. So the pictures that you saw are just the beauty of Mexico. I mean, it's a teal-green wall. And granted, I'll go out, and we all, as photographers, color photographers, do love the light of the morning and the light of the afternoon, and writers can't stand that because they're like, oh, I guess you have to wait until the magic hour, right? And sometimes they want to be, I don't know, finished by then. Or I'll just go out. I almost miss my plane all the time because I'm always going out just to catch more of the good light, and then I run into the airport and ever. But yeah, the colors are there. Yes. I have looked at film in my closet recently. And some of these pictures, you can probably tell that the scans weren't the greatest and that they were on film, but it takes very time consuming to get the new scans made in Mexico City. I would love to shoot film again, honestly speaking, but digital does have it's reality. And I have to admit that in some of these really low light situations that I get into, with 1 light bulb or no light bulb, I find that digital captures more of that light. I don't shoot sunsets, and if I did, I wouldn't shoot them with digital, but because that would not look good. Okay. I can't really read. Couple more questions or one more? Oh, repeat the question. Do I ever use film? Yeah. Funny that you ask, because I never know what my next project is, which is why to plan a year in advance to come to this conference was so beautiful, but I actually thought she was asking me for 2 weeks later, but she meant a year and 2 weeks. So I'm going to continue doing the coffee work fascinates me, and I love being in nature like that. I mean, people think, oh, Mexico's so dangerous, the drug war is horrible, and it's so dangerous, but I actually think being on coffee fincas, it's going to be some tropical bug that gets me, or some insect that I sit on while I'm taking pictures, or snake. And so I really love being on coffee farms, and I want to finish that story because I think there are a lot of layers to it. And what else am I doing next? I'm finishing a new website that's taken me 2 years, and we hope that will launch in about a month. And it's all very time consuming. So, but not far. Okay. Okay, yes. The extent to which photojournalists stage their photos. This is a super important topic, and it's very confusing because when I'm working, I'm alone, and I follow the ethics I was taught 20 years ago. And I would even if no one had taught me these ethics. If I'm a photojournalist and I'm representing reality to you, I cannot move anything, I don't touch anything, I don't manipulate anything. It makes me feel creepy to do that if I would, and I stick by those rules. In recent years, there are more and more stories, especially in contests and controversies over photographers manipulating things and adding things to photos. And this is all really disturbing to me. As I said earlier, I don't even know how to do it. I'm embarrassed to say. My Photoshop skills, I just don't do that kind of composing of photographs. And I think it's disturbing because it hurts our credibility. There are I think that's one of the biggest problems facing photojournalists and journalists in general in the world today is credibility. And it's something that I nurture, and all the stories that you saw in the slideshow took a great deal of access and trust. And if people are manipulating images, and also if people are misusing your images, which is another huge problem, stealing them off the internet and doing whatever, it's very scary because then you've made promises to people and then you can't keep them. And then journalism suffers, and we all suffer because we won't have journalism any longer, truthful journalism. And I feel after 20 years in the profession that I went into a profession thinking I could make a difference, and I respected it a lot, and I still do, and I love journalism. And I just hope that actions like that, when it does happen, don't destroy the credibility of the whole industry, because that hurts everything in the end. And I really care about this industry.